Welcome to the Orca. You don't hear much about this trend, but it's clear the war on poverty is actually being won. For 2 decades, statistics show the number of Canadians living below the poverty line has been dropping, down to 7.8% of the population in the year 2018. It's not zero, but it is significant progress. Roslyn Kunin is a consulting economist and a senior fellow with the Canada West Foundation. She recently wrote a piece for the Orca on the fight against poverty, and we're delighted that she's with us here in our Orca studios. Hello there.
Very glad to be here.
Thanks for sharing your time with us. So I say we're winning the war on poverty. How are we winning?
Well, the number of poor people is, I think, dropping like a stone is probably the right metaphor to use at this time, because in 2006, there are several measures of poverty. By one measure of poverty, we've gone from over 15 to just about 7. Overall, any measure of poverty that we look at, the number of poor people is being drastically reduced, especially in the groups where we usually consider we have a lot of poor people, like seniors. It used to be being senior, being old and being poor was a cliche. The two went together. Now, I won't ask you to guess, but only 3% of seniors are below the standard poverty line. We have solved the problem of being old and being poor.
Let's back up and talk about the poverty line. Who defines it and what is it?
There are several, and they are very hard to define. There is the market basket line, which is the most recent one. It's only been out for a few years, so you can't use it for long-term analysis. And it looks at what it costs to put a market basket of what would be considered a basic standard of living for a given family size in a given community. So it would be different in Vancouver than it would be in Terrace, for example, because of housing costs. And that is the most recent one, and that is the one that's gone from 15 to 7, that's been cut in half since 2006. Then there is the LICO, the low income cutoff, which has been used for several years, and that is defined, and all these numbers are arbitrary. You can pick another number and get different conclusions, that if you have to spend 63% or more of your income on food, clothing, and shelter, you're below the low income cutoff, and that has been, the number of people below that cutoff has been dropping, and it is the lowest it has ever been. And then there's another one that is entirely relative, so we can see it move up and down a little bit, but we'll never see it disappear, because it is defined as the low income mark, and it basically, to get into terms, if you take the 50 percentile, the line at which half the population is above and half is below for income, and then you take the bottom half and divide it by half, that gives you that low income measure. And so we will always have people below that by definition. We always have half of the bottom half, but even then, the number of people in the bottom half of the bottom half has been falling.
Now, as you say, it all depends upon where you live, because poverty in Vancouver is a lot different than poverty in Terrace, let's say.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we live in, take Vancouver, one of the richest cities in one of the richest provinces in one of the richest countries in the world, and yet we still depend upon food banks, a third of which their clients are children. We have children still going to school hungry, who are going to bed hungry. We haven't solved that problem. We're not even close to solving that particular problem.
We are a lot closer than we think we are.
That's good news.
Because again, the number of children in poverty has fallen from about 16% to 9%. Now 9% is 9% too many. That is really good news, but we've got the direction right, and we've also got the policy right. Our current federal government has introduced the Canada Child Benefit, which gives money to all low-income families with children. It is means-tested, and the amount is based on need, and that has been responsible for a significant reduction in the number of children and families in poverty. So we still have a way to go. We shouldn't, any hungry child is a shame, but we're moving in the right direction there.
A very sensitive issue is the cultural disparity between Canadians as well, when you take the Indigenous community versus the non-Indigenous community. And it seems that poverty is more of an issue in the Indigenous community. How do we solve that? Because we've been working on that for generations.
Okay. Well, I think it is because we care an awful lot. And we see all the indigenous people who are jobless, who are poor, who have other problems, and we don't see, and I have seen a lot of them in my work because I've worked with indigenous communities, particularly the Haida, in economic development. We don't see the rest of their generation, and maybe it isn't 90%, maybe it's only 80%, that are doing very well, that are staying in school, that are getting good jobs, that are working for themselves, their families, and their communities. So there has been tremendous progress. We still haven't got it down to zero, and we still should care about all the people who need a lot of help even at this stage, but the numbers who are doing well are increasing.
Exactly, and that's because, Roslyn, we live in a country that, as I mentioned, is so rich. I think anytime you hear a story of a child going to bed hungry, that's one child too many.
Yes.
Particularly in this day and age. Where does it, although we're down to 7.8%, how do we eradicate that and get it down to zero? Yes, we're going the right way, the right direction, but what can we do today to expedite that?
Well, we carry on with our policies. I think we have to reach, there are certain communities that haven't been touched. They are small in number, but they are very visible, and they hit us in the heart, including the children who are still in poverty, the homeless people, the people who are frequently dual diagnosed. They have addictions, they have other health problems, and an awful lot of them have mental health problems. And for those, we need to find those specific groups and target programs to help them. I think throwing money at, for example, homeless dual diagnosed people is not a long-term solution, though it might alleviate temporarily their problems. I think we have to make sure we, first of all, find out what it is wrong with them. Is it an addiction problem? Is it an illness? Is it mental illness? What is it? Homes are only part of it. And then make sure we have the resources, if indeed there are resources, to treat it, because we don't have magic cures for many mental illnesses yet.
No, from a lot of people I've spoken to over the years, housing is one thing, shelter is one thing, but treatment is what they want more than anything.
Yes, and treatment is a long-term solution, because if you take a person with all these problems and give them shelter, they might even walk away from it. They might feel caged by it.
You've been working this area for a long time. You must be heartened by what you're seeing and the fact the numbers are down to 7.8%, as I mentioned. But with all that expertise, do you have one jewel that you can give us to say this candidate is what we should be doing right now?
Yes, because I'm going to lose my license as a dismal economist because I've got nothing but good news. And
that's okay.
One of the pieces of good news is not only is poverty at an all-time low, but unemployment is at an all-time low. We have better level of employment than we have had since they started keeping the numbers. We have the lowest level of unemployment that we have since we've been keeping the numbers, and that, I think, is a true long-term solution to a lot of the problems of poverty and homelessness and other things. So the one thing we should be doing is making sure that adults and young people, because even if you're an adult, your career isn't fixed forever anymore, are getting the education they need so they can turn in to the people we need to fill all the vacant jobs we have, because we have vacant jobs as our bigger problem rather than unemployed people, and help our economy grow.
Is that where it all starts, education? It's a
I
lot of it.
think so. I think that is a very, very big part of it. Yes.
A pleasure to have you come and share your time with us today. Roslyn Kunin, thank you so much for joining us.
Always enjoy talking to you. Thank you.